Pull out your phone and turn it off completely. Remove the battery if you can. The photos are still there. The contacts are still there. The operating system is still there. None of it requires power to persist. That is the defining property of non-volatile memory. The ability to retain stored information with no applied power for years across temperature extremes, across thousands of reboot cycles. And it's not obvious that this should be physically possible at all. Memory requires storing a distinction between two states. Maintaining that distinction without continuously refreshing it requires fighting against thermal equilibrium. And thermal equilibrium, given enough time, erases distinctions. The figure shows the problem directly. Cut power at the left edge and watch what happens to the three memory types. DRAM in Navy leaks its stored charge away in roughly 40 milliseconds. It needs to be refreshed every 64 milliseconds or the data is gone. SRAM in Crimson doesn't even last that long. The moment the supply voltage drops, the cross-coupled latch loses its state and the bit is destroyed. Flash in green stays flat. It doesn't move. The charge is there an hour later, a month later, a decade later. The question worth asking is not what non-volatile memory does. It's obvious from the figure. The question is what physical mechanism makes the flat green curve possible when the laws of thermodynamics seem to demand that the stored charge should leak away. The answer is an energy barrier. And the rest of this video is about what that barrier is, how it works, and why everything in this arc of videos is ultimately a story about managing that barrier over the lifetime of a real product. Now, before we can appreciate the barrier, it's worth understanding exactly why DRAM and SRAM can't hold their states. Because the leakage mechanisms are not flaws in the design, they are fundamental physics. A DRAM cell is one transistor and one capacitor. That's it. A one bit of storage in two devices, which is why DRAM can pack tens of billions of bits into a single die. The capacitor stores the bit as the presence or absence of charge. The transistor acts as a switch that connects the capacitor to the bit line during read and write operations. The problem is the capacitor. At the capacitor sizes used in modern DRAM, roughly 10 femtofarads, the charge leaks away through the off-state transistor in milliseconds. The access transistor can't be shut off perfectly. Subthreshold current flows even when the gate voltage is below threshold, and that current slowly drains the capacitor. The Navy curve shows the exponential decay. The sense threshold, the 50% charge level below which the bit becomes ambiguous, is crossed in about 40 milliseconds under typical conditions. This is why your system memory is constantly being refreshed. Every 64 milliseconds, a controller circuit reads every row of DRAM and rewrites the charge back to full level before it can decay to the sense threshold. That refresh operation consumes real power, on the order of a watt for a modern DIMM. And it continues even when you're not doing anything, or even when the system is idle, even when the screen is off. Now, the SRAM solves the leakage problem differently by using 6 transistors per cell in a cross-coupled latch that regenerates its own state continuously as long as power is applied. No refresh is needed, no leakage limit. But the area cost is enormous, 50 to 100 times larger per bit than DRAM, which is why SRAM is used only for caches where capacity can be small but speed must be maximum. The right panel is the non-volatile solution in schematic form. Replace the decay capacitor with a charge node surrounded by an energy barrier. Make the barrier high enough that the thermal leakage current is negligible. Not on a millisecond scale, but on a decade time scale. That is the core physical idea behind every flash memory cell ever made. Remember that energy barrier is doing all the heavy lifting here. And to understand why barriers work, we need to make the barrier concrete. What it's made of, how high is it, and why thermal fluctuations can't overcome it. Now, in the floating gate flash cell, the charge storage node is a layer of polysilicon, the floating gate, completely surrounded by silicon dioxide. It's called a floating gate because it has no electrical connection to anything. It's an isolated conductor buried inside the device. The left panel shows the energy band structure of the storage stack at zero bias, the retention condition. The silicon dioxide layers appear as tall barriers relative to the silicon channel below and the floating gate in the middle. The barrier height at the silicon oxide interface is 3.1 electron volts. That's the energy required for an electron to escape from the floating gate and travel through the oxide back to the channel. Now let's put that in context. Room temperature thermal energy is kT, where K is the Boltzmann constant and T is 300 Kelvin, is 26 millielectron volts. The barrier is 3.1 electron volts. The barrier is 120 times larger than the thermal energy available to an electron sitting on the floating gate. The probability of thermal escape scales exponentially with the ratio of barrier height to thermal energy. At 120 times, the thermal escape rate is not just low, it's astronomically low. The expected retention time from thermal escape alone is many orders of magnitude longer than the age of the universe. So the charge isn't going anywhere on its own. That's the retention picture. But retention creates a puzzle. If the barrier is that impossible, how does the charge get there in the first place? Now, the right panel shows what happens when a high voltage is applied to the control gate during programming. The electric field across the thin tunnel oxide, the thinner of the two oxides, between the channel and the floating gate, is now around 10 megavolts per centimeter. That field tilts the energy band diagram. The oxide barrier is still there, but its effective width at the electron energy level is now thin enough for quantum mechanical tunneling to occur at a measurable rate. The green dashed line is the Fowler-Nordheim tunneling path. Electrons are not going over the barrier, they're going through it. Now, the tunneling mechanism is what makes flash programmable, and the enormous sensitivity of tunneling rate to electric field is what makes the same oxide both an impenetrable barrier at retention and a conducting channel on command. Fowler-Nordheim tunneling, the quantum mechanical transmission of electrons through a thin dielectric barrier under high electric field, is the mechanism that makes flash memory programmable and erasable. The figure shows the Fowler-Nordheim tunneling current density as a function of electric field along the tunnel oxide. The vertical axis is logarithmic, covering about 30 orders of magnitude. The navy curve rises steeply with increasing field. The green vertical line at 1 megavolt per centimeter is the retention condition. Essentially, no applied bias across the oxide during normal storage. The crimson vertical line is 10 megavolt per centimeter is the programming field. At 1 megavolt per centimeter, the tunneling current is so small it can barely be expressed in engineering notation. We are talking roughly 10 to the minus 28 amperes per square centimeter. A current so small that if you gathered the electrons flowing from 1 square centimeter of oxide per year, you wouldn't have enough to measure. This is why the floating gate holds its charge for years without any leakage worth mentioning. Now, at 10 megavolt per centimeter, the same exponential relationship gives a current density of around 10 to the minus 3 amperes per square centimeter. Now, at that current level, charging a floating gate capacitance of a few attofarads takes microseconds. The programming operation is complete. The key insight is the extreme nonlinearity. The field increased by a factor of 10. The current increased by 25 orders of magnitude. This is the lever that allows flash to be both a perfect passive storage device at retention and an actively programmable device under applied voltage. Now, erase works the same way in reverse. Apply a positive voltage to the silicon bulk or a negative voltage to the control gate. Create a high field in the opposite polarity across the tunnel oxide, and the electrons tunnel back off the floating gate and into the channel. The oxide doesn't care which direction the current flows. It responds to the field. Now, programming and arrays work, but every time electrons are driven through the oxide accumulates a small amount of permanent damage. And that damage is the physical origin of the two ways a flash cell eventually fails. Now, flash memory has two failure modes that operate on completely different time scales and through completely different physical mechanisms. And understanding both is essential before you can reason about flash reliability at any level. The first is retention failure. A programmed cell loses charge over time even at zero applied bias through mechanisms including trap assisted tunneling and oxide defect mediated conduction. The programmed threshold voltage drifts downward. If it drifts far enough past the sensing threshold for the erase state, the bit is read incorrectly. Retention failure is a continuous slow process that depends on temperature, on the quality of the tunnel oxide, and critically, on how many times the cell has been cycled. The second is an endurance failure. Every program erase cycle forces a large current through the tunnel oxide. Each pass of that current generates interface traps at the oxide silicon boundary and leaves behind fixed charge in the oxide bulk. Now, these defects don't anneal at room temperature, they accumulate. And as they accumulate, they shift the threshold voltage of both the erased and programmed states, and the window begins between them narrows. The gray shaded region between the two curves is the sensing window, the voltage difference between the programmed and the erased threshold voltage distributions. Fresh from the factory, the window may be 4 to 5 volts. After 10,000 erase cycles, program erase, the window may have closed down to 2 volts or so. So, when the window narrows enough that the distributions overlap, the cell can no longer reliably distinguish its two states, and the block must be retired. The coupling between retention and endurance is an important subtlety. A cell that has been cycled close to its endurance limit has more oxide damage and more interface traps than a fresh cell. Those traps provide additional leakage paths for the storage charge. So the same cell that might hold data for 10 years at low cycle count will only hold it reliably for a few hundred hours at high cycle count. Retention lifetime and endurance lifetime are not independent specifications. They are a coupled system that the reliability engineer must manage together. Now, let's look at what the arc would cover. At the bottom in this is this video, the physical foundation, the energy barrier, the retention and endurance concepts, the Fowler-Nordheim tunneling mechanism. Every video about this one assumes you know the material in this layer. The C1 videos build the full floating gate and charge trap cell models. You'll derive the threshold voltage equation from first principles using the band diagram introduced here in slide 3. You'll understand the coupling ratio, the fraction of control gate voltage that actually reaches the floating gate, and why it dominates cell behavior. Charge trap cells, where charge is stored in discrete trap sites rather than on the floating conductor, get their own treatment because they're increasingly important in modern 3D NAND. C2 videos cover NAND array architecture. A flash die contains billions of cells arranged in strings, pages, and blocks. And the way those cells are addressed during program read and erase operations creates constraints and failure modes that don't exist at the individual cell level. Program inhibit, read, disturb, and neighbor coupling interference are all array level phenomena. The C3 videos address multi level cell operation. By storing 2, 3, 4 bits per cell through finer threshold voltage distributions, Modern flash achieves the densities needed for terabyte SSDs. But finer distributions come at the cost of smaller sensing windows, which means tighter error budgets, which means shorter effective lifetimes. C4 videos go deep on reliability physics, the quantitative models for retention loss rate, endurance degradation, and how they interact at real operating temperatures and use conditions. And finally, the C5 videos close the arc with system level compensation layer, error correction codes that catch bit errors before they become data loss, ware leveling algorithms that spread the write load evenly across the block population, and flash translation layer logic that maps logical addresses to physical blocks in a way that maximizes effective endurance. Every one of these layers ultimately rests on what you learned in the last 15 minutes. Charge behind a barrier high enough to hold for years, and the engineering challenge of moving that charge deliberately without destroying the barrier in the process.